Israel's escalating aggression in Gaza, Lebanon and Syria has raised critical questions about its underlying motives and strategic goals. From reigniting its brutal war on Gaza to intensifying assaults in southern Lebanon and launching repeated airstrikes in Syria, these actions have severe humanitarian and regional security implications. What drives Israel's continued violations and attacks? Are these questions part of a broader strategy? And how is the international community responding to the resulting crises? All these questions and more will be discussed today in this episode of In Depth, so stay tuned. Israel's renewed airstrikes targeting southern Lebanon have endangered the already shaky truce that ended a year-long conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, as reported by the Guardian. According to the newspaper, the recent escalation is the most intense since a ceasefire was adopted on November 27th. In addition, Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam warned that renewed military operations in southern Lebanon could risk dragging the country back into war, while the UN peacekeeping force cautioned against further military escalation that could break the ceasefire. Meanwhile, in Israel, thousands of protesters continue to take to the streets in opposition of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, urging him to stop the fighting in Gaza.
In southern Lebanon, daily life remains fraught with tension as Israeli violations of the ceasefire agreement continue to disrupt the fragile peace. The UNIFIL has repeatedly expressed concern over these incidents, which include airstrikes and the ongoing occupation of Lebanese territory. These actions not only violate UN Security Council Resolution 1701, but also threaten the sovereignty and stability of the region. The impact on local populations has been devastating. Israeli airstrikes have destroyed homes, agricultural land, and critical infrastructure, leaving many villages in ruins and displacing countless families. The World Bank estimates that recovery and reconstruction needs in Lebanon amount to $11 billion, highlighting the extensive damage caused by these operations. UNIFIL commanders have emphasized the urgent need for the Israeli-occupied forces to withdraw from southern Lebanon and for the Lebanese Armed Forces (LAF) to fully redeploy in the region. UNIFIL spokesman Andrea Tinenti stressed that stability hinges on this redeployment and Israel's exit, while Mission Head General Oraldo Lazaro Sainz called for de-escalation and dialogue to achieve a lasting ceasefire. Despite these challenges, UNIFIL remains committed to supporting the Lebanese armed forces in its efforts to restore order and security. However, the mission faces ongoing challenges, including restricted freedom of movement and the need for adequate resources to fulfill its mandate. As tensions persist, the call for a complete withdrawal from Israeli forces and the full implementation of Resolution 1701 remains critical. The path to lasting peace in southern Lebanon depends on the cooperation of all parties involved and the unwavering commitment of UNIFIL and the LAF to protect civilians and restore stability.
To help us analyze the current situation, we're joined from Beirut by Ahmed Younes, a political analyst, and from Cairo by Usama Saeed, the editor-in-chief of Al Akhbar newspaper. Good morning to both of you, and thank you for joining us here on Qnews. Let me start off with Mr. Saeed. As the Israeli occupation forces escalate the aggressions on multiple fronts, What do you believe are the primary motivations behind its increasing attacks in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria?
First of all, greetings to you and to the viewers and the honorable guest. Of course, there are strategic objectives for resuming the Israeli aggression on more than one front. In my opinion, it is an attempt for the Israeli government to restore the displacement scheme to relocate the Palestinian population out of their lands. That's why they are resuming the aggressions again. Israel thinks that the displacement scheme that they have thought all along is now being exposed to different pressures, especially when Egypt adopted a plan to counter this displacement scheme. Also, the addressing the how the U.S. Um, changed its position towards displacement, describing it as a recommendation or only a proposal, which made the Israeli government feel that the displacement scheme is now taking a step back and there is no true intention to implement this scheme. That's why they are resuming the aggression and expanding the hostilities to push the Palestinians out of their lands forcibly. And Israel announced that they are forming an administration to help Palestinians leave their lands, which is a very serious step as the continuation to this approach they have been adopting all along. It is to pressure also, there are also pressures on Lebanese politicians regarding the peace process. They are trying to pressure Lebanon to go for political negotiations away from the agreement that was reached upon and agreed upon with the US and French mediation. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to worsen the conflict once again and escalated in the region to achieve the displacement scheme and also to fight the internal disagreements inside Israel and to satisfy the far right that is always for increasing the conflict.
Okay, if we can get Mr. Yunus's opinion, focusing here on Lebanon. As the Israeli aggression escalates in southern Lebanon, what are the underlying motives behind its repeated ceasefire violations, and how is this undermining the already fragile peace process? What do you see, comes next within the next few months when it comes to the Israeli-Lebanese conflict?
Good morning, and thank you for having me in this interview. Israeli repeated the ceasefire violations in southern Lebanon serve multiple strategic and political objectives. Militarily, these incursions allow Israel to maintain pressure on Hezbollah, testing its response and discarding its capabilities without engaging in a full-scale war. So this tactic aligns with Israel's long-standing doctrine of preventive and deterrent strikes to prevent Hezbollah from strengthening its military infrastructure near the border. So politically, these actions send a message to both domestic and international audience that Israel retains military superiority and will not tolerate a growing threat from Lebanon. And through this regional instability, maintaining a controlled level of conflict can serve to rally domestic support around.
But are the Israelis actually trying to, I understand that they may be trying to pressure Hezbollah, but also are they trying to pressure the Lebanese government into taking certain actions or, pushing back, taking a land grab, for instance?
Yes, these escalations severely undermine the already fragile peace in the region. These tensions that could spiral into a broader confrontation. Lebanon already grappling with economic and political crisis, faces additional instability as border clashes disrupt civilian life and weaken state institutions' ability to mediate or de-escalate. So Israel's actions also challenge diplomatic efforts to maintain stability, as repeated ceasefire breaches in the international or the trust in
Yes.
international mechanism, such as UNIFIL, for example, designed to oversee peace along the border. So it is a critical situation we are facing now.
Okay, if we can ask Mr. Said, Israel's resumption of its genocidal actions in Gaza raises many questions. Do you believe that this escalation is driven more by the internal political dynamics within Israel? Because we've seen, mass protests across Israel, in addition to the internal issues that has faced the government of Israel in general.
Of course, the internal dynamics in Israel are very challenging to the Benjamin Netanyahu government. For the first time, we are seeing severe disagreements in the Israeli inside, with the dismissal of different senior officials in Israel, and especially the head of the Shabak, Renan Bar, and demanding different Israeli generals to overthrow Benjamin Netanyahu or open an investigation with him regarding these violations. We have also seen attempts to dismiss the legal advisor to the prime minister. We have seen the Israeli street opposing these moves, and we have seen Ben Gvir joining the government back after resuming the fight in Gaza. There are also pressures from the families of the detainees to go forward with the exchange deals and the release of detainees from the Gaza Strip. All of these internal pressures make Benjamin Netanyahu feel that he's already trapped, and the way out of this trap is to resume the war, because with resuming the war, he's postponing the idea of accountability and being held accountable for his actions, and he's satisfying the far right and guaranteeing the support of these officials, and he's also now powerful to pressure his opposition in the Israeli inside. We cannot also overlook the internal disagreements in Israel, as well as the US position provided the opportunity to Benjamin Netanyahu to resume the fight and the aggressions once more on the Gaza Strip. There was an announced truce, a ceasefire agreement with clear stages to move to a peace process, and we were about to enter the second phase of negotiations for the ceasefire agreement, but the US position changed with President Trump giving the green light to Netanyahu to impunity from responsibility and getting out of the agreements Israel committed and pledged to during the ceasefire agreement, which give the opportunity to Netanyahu to regain to resume the fight if the US really had a political will and true pressures on the Israeli government. Netanyahu wouldn't have been able to resume the war again. Therefore, the United States must realize that they are playing an integral, vital role to pressure Netanyahu, and there are consensuses that was reached upon with the US brokerage, as the United States is a partner in this ceasefire agreement, and they should have applied more pressure to complete this truce agreement. But we have listened to different manipulations by the United States administration, saying that they will approve any Israeli actions and resuming the fight is an Israeli decision, and they will support the government in whatever decision they make. These manipulations gave Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu the opportunity to take advantage of the situation for his personal interests, for his personal safety and political safety. The loser at the end is the entire region and the international interests, and most prominent of which is the unarmed civilian Palestinian people.
Okay, Mr. Yunus, if we can go back to Lebanon, by disregarding the UN Resolution 1701, why is Israel still gaining control over strategic points in southern Lebanon, and what are the long-term goals in destabilizing the region? And will the international community somehow interfere to stop this, or is this something that is not going to happen in the near future?
Israel's disregarded for UN Resolution 1701, which mandated a cessation of hostilities and the withdrawal of armed forces from the Lebanon-Israel border, reflects its broader strategic calculations in the region. By maintaining control over key strategic points, such as the 5 disputed border areas, Israel ensures a tactical advantage in intelligence gathering, border security, and military positioning. So this approach allows it to monitor Hezbollah's activities closely, disrupt potential supply routes, and create a buffer zone that limits Hezbollah operation flexibility. Israel's continued presence in these areas signals its willingness to fully set the ground without guarantee that Hezbollah's military capabilities are curtailed, effectively keeping the border in a state of controlled instability rather than allowing a stable security environment to take root. So in the long term, Israel's actions serve a dual purpose. First, to keep Lebanon in a state of vulnerability, preventing Hezbollah from consolidating power or turning southern Lebanon into a more formidable military front. Second, by destabilizing the area, Israel exerts pressure on the Lebanese state. So the internal divisions try to discouraging any unified military or political response that could strengthen Hezbollah. So this strategy also allows Israel to periodically justify military operations under the pretext of national
they've been
security.
green-lighted basically by the U.S. Because there was coordination by the Israelis with the U.S. before these bombardments. Is that a correct statement?
Okay, so I don't understand.
The U.S. Basically green-lighted, Israel's operations right now, the most recent operations within the region. Do you think that this is also within the U.S.'s strategy to weaken groups like Hezbollah?
Yes, it is. Yes, by supporting the U.S. supporting Israel to make limiting the capabilities of Hezbollah, and Israel non-compliance with Resolution 1701 is not just about border security, but about shaping the geopolitical landscape in its favor, ensuring that Lebanon remains too weak to challenge its strategic dominance in the region.
Okay. If you could move to Mr. Said, recently tens of thousands of Israelis took to the streets to demand an end to the fighting in Gaza. How can the Israeli government reconcile its objectives in resuming its war with the urgent need to secure the safe return of the remaining detainees? because we can see that the Israeli streets are basically inflamed and people are unhappy.
True, these massive protests are of course important pressuring card, but they are not enough to convince Benjamin Netanyahu to go with the will of the Israeli street. He's placing his bets on the disagreements inside Israel, and he's placing the bet on his ability to maneuver professionally that he has been doing during his history. He's trying to get out of these pressures. In my personal opinion, Netanyahu has made up his mind. He wanted to resume the war and the conflict, and he wants to keep it as is to maintain his presence in power. If he wanted to release the detainees, there was a political path that he could have taken, because the political path is the one that guaranteed the release of the detainees from Gaza to their families. The first truce announced in November 2023, and then the second announced a few weeks ago that was supposed to continue for the upcoming weeks and months, was the only guarantee for the complete release of the detainees alive and bringing them back to their families. But Netanyahu and his government took a different path, using the systematic killing to the Palestinians as a means to pressure Palestinian factions and resistance and the Palestinian people to implement the displacement scheme, as I have referred earlier. Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government must realize that they have failed choosing the military path to bring back the detainees, but they won't admit it, and they want to continue the war. It is not a war for the release of detainees as the Israeli streets want. It is the war of Netanyahu, a personal war of a man aware that his political future is directly linked to the continuation of this war, and that's why he's willing to pay any price possible to continue the war, as the end of the war means the end of his political future. And
well, sir, I apologize, I have to cut you off there because we're out of time for this episode. But thank you both so much. That was Osama Saeed, the editor-in-chief of Al-Akhbar newspaper, and from Beirut, Ahmed Younes, a political analyst. Thank you both for your insights and joining us here today. That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. I'm Rehan Morsi. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned.